What's up, guys? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. We got 5 bold predictions for what promises to be a wild Week 17 in the NFL. We got games Wednesday, game on Thursday, Saturday slate, Sunday, even Monday night. A lot to keep track of this week. But let's get right into it. Number 1, Brian Thomas going to Jacksonville. He rips off his 3rd straight 100-yard game. So those of us in the Jags community, we've been on this for a while, but over the last couple of weeks, the Brian Thomas hype train has officially left the station. And despite playing with Mac Jones, Brian Thomas has gone for 19 catches on 27 targets, 237 yards, and 3 touchdowns over his last 2 games against Vegas and the Jets. He's basically the entire Jags offense at this point. And honestly, if you watch these games, which I hope you're not, the rest of the offense is almost working against Brian Thomas. He's still putting up massive numbers. This week, Jags get just a huge showdown in division against the Tennessee Titans, who just gave up 38 unanswered to the Colts at one point last week. Thomas had 8 for 86 in the first meeting with Tennessee on 12 targets. That was just 3 weeks ago in Nashville. Over his last 4 games, Thomas is really starting to command targets at a crazy rate. Evan Ingram being out, I think, is part of it, but 10, 12, 14, and 13 targets over that span. And what's been overall not a very productive offense, the Jags are basically force feeding him at this point, and rightfully so. Now, looking at the matchup here, Tennessee has been a good run defense this season, but they're down to 23rd against the pass. They're 30th in pressure rate. Both of these teams really just playing out the string at this point. So I think we see an aggressive Mac Jones at home. Really nothing to lose. He's been better in his home starts this year compared to on the road. Brian Thomas gets after that Titans secondary, puts up his 3rd consecutive 100-yard game, putting him on pace, by the way, to quietly finish in the top 5 in total receiving yards this season. Next on the list, we're going to another divisional matchup. We're going to say Bucky Iriving leads you, yes, you, to a fantasy title with 150 scrimmage yards against the Carolina Panthers. So if you're a Bucky Irving manager, you could not have asked for a better matchup to wrap up the fantasy season than the Carolina Panthers, a team that has allowed 200-plus rushing yards in 4 consecutive games. They haven't allowed under 165 rushing yards in 2 months at this point. We got to go all the way back to mid-October. Carolina is far and away the best fantasy matchup for running backs this season. They allow almost 30 fantasy points per game to the position. They've given up almost 400 more yards to running backs than any other defense in the NFL. We're talking 5.1 yards per carry, 16 rushing touchdowns. They're also in the bottom 10 in both yards per target and catch percentage allowed to the running back position. We already saw Bucky Irving run wild on the Panthers back in week 13, 25 carries, 152 yards and a touchdown. Also added 3 catches for 33 yards. Yeah, he's still splitting snaps with Rachaad White. That is a concern, but we saw Irving handle a 59% snap share last week, his 2nd highest of the season. White also lost a key fumble that basically lost them the game last week, so could be a doghouse scenario for him. Maybe that's what we're hoping for. Either way, the numbers tell us, the eye test certainly tells us that Irving has looked like the much better back of the two. I think the Bucs lean heavily on him in this must-win game. Marquise Bucky Irving goes for 150-plus scrimmage yards this week in a win over Carolina. Sticking with the running backs, we're going to go to Saquon Barkley. We'll say Saquon eclipses the 2,000-yard mark this week with 1 game remaining. All right, so Saquon is sitting at 1,838 rushing yards heading into week 17. So some basic math tells me that he needs 162 yards in this game to hit 2,000 for the year. Barkley almost got to this number last week against Washington, finished with 150 yards in that crazy loss, which actually feels like a disappointment considering he was up over 100 yards in the first quarter. And obviously Washington was able to key on him after Jalen Hurts went out. But I'm assuming we get Jalen Hurts back this week, hoping, praying that's the case so we don't have to see Kenny Pickett again. And I think the Eagles could be a little bit careful with Hurts coming off the concussion. I think this is a Saquon spot against that Cowboys rush defense. The Eagles dominated Dallas back in their first meeting in November. And, Saquon didn't really have a huge game. The game got out of hand. Philly's defense held Dallas to just 6 points. We only saw Barkley carry 14 times for just 66 yards, one of his lowest outputs of the season. Still gave you a healthy 4.7 yards per carry. But this Dallas team, despite being eliminated, they're playing good football right now. I think this game will be more competitive. And I think the Eagles care about getting Saquon to 2,000 yards and perhaps even giving him a shot at breaking Eric Dickerson's single season record. The record is 2,105 yards. So a big game here would set Barkley up to potentially break that record next week against who else but the New York Giants. So I'm calling for a big Saquon game here against the Dallas defense that ranks 31st in rush defense EPA. They allow 4.8 yards per carry. Saquon gets to at least those 162 yards to eclipse the 2,000-yard mark with a week to play. Our fourth bold prediction for week 17, Josh Allen. We're going to say he accounts for 4 touchdowns in a win over the Jets to solidify himself as the MVP favorite with a week to play. So Josh Allen is still the MVP betting favorite right now at DraftKings. He is the odds-on guy right now, but the odds moved from 9-1 to -500 at DraftKings this week after that sloppy win over the Patriots. Now, part of the argument, of course, is that Lamar Jackson continues to play well. He's having an incredible year. I'm as in on Lamar as anybody, but Allen has the better team argument right now. Bills probably aren't getting the 1 seed, but they'll finish with a better record than Baltimore. Lamar's also won it twice, including last year, which in my mind should not matter, but it does. And we see this across every sport, kind of a take your turn type of thing when it comes to the MVP. Saquon Barkley, somewhat of a legitimate candidate. I just think too many people won't vote for a running back. Jared Goff certainly has a case, and I get it. I'm coming around on Jared Goff, especially with all the injuries in Detroit and the fact that they just keep rolling. I just can't envision Jared Goff winning this award over a player with a profile like Josh Allen's. More than anything, though, it just feels like it's Josh Allen's turn to win this award. And, I think one more big performance this week could essentially seal it up. The Bills play their final home game of the season. They get the lowly New York Jets coming in, the most mistake-prone team in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. As I record this, he's questionable to play. I would imagine he plays, but is he 100%? We'll see. Not really sure it matters. The worst thing that could have happened for the Jets was the Bills to have the game they did last week against New England. Yeah, they escaped with a win, but it was a letdown in just about all phases. Didn't really possess the ball all that much. I don't think we're seeing that 2 weeks in a row. I know Josh Allen is banged up, but I think he guts it out. The Bills walk all over this Jets team. Josh Allen gives us 4 total touchdowns to put a bow on his MVP season. All right, our fifth and final bold prediction. We're going a little bit off the reservation here. Mason Rudolph, Mac Jones, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Spencer Rattler. Those 4 quarterbacks combine for 8 interceptions this week. And honestly, 8 might be low. Maybe we'd have to bump this thing up to 10. But anyway, here we go. We're going out with a bang this week. We're targeting 4 of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL. This group only combined for 6 interceptions last week. We need to keep that in mind, with Rudolph leading the way, accounting for half of those. But we're raising the stakes. 8 combined interceptions for Rudolph, Jones, DTR, and Rattler. The big 4, if you will, as many are calling them. So Rudolph and Jones face off against each other in that Titans-Jags game. DTR gets a really tough matchup against a Miami defense that's playing well, and Spencer Rattler goes up against the Raiders. Now, what concerns me a bit is that all of these defenses rank in the bottom half of the league in terms of takeaways. Like, the Jags only have 5 interceptions on the year. The Raiders and the Dolphins only have 8. So we're up against it here, but I think that changes this week. None of these teams are really playing for anything. These quarterbacks will take some chances. They'll make their usual array of horrific throws and bad decisions. Really, the biggest liability here might be one of them getting benched at some point, but we'll live with that risk. Mason Rudolph, Mac Jones, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Spencer Rattler, 8 interceptions combined in week 17.